So, Dead Space is one of those games that I absolutely enjoyed when I was younger. I would play the original game in complete darkness, and I would be so scared to progress through each chapter. I have horrible anxiety when it comes to playing these games, but once I got older, I have become more desensitized to the horror I see on my screen. The only games that still to this day give me chills are Alien Isolation, Outlast, Resident Evil 2, and the Dead Space remake, or Dead Space. And since I recently covered the absolute death out of Dead Rising, I figured it was time to move on to something else. So, the original Dead Space was released in October of 2008, and it saw massive critical success. And we would see 2 more sequels after that would be successful. I mean, besides for Dead Space 3. I seem to be the only person who enjoyed Dead Space 3, but we'll talk about that another time. Recently, in 2021, we saw leaks and rumors about EA possibly working on a Dead Space remake, and we didn't really hear much about it until the Game Awards in 2021. This is where we got to see a trailer, and at this point, fans from all over the world got excited to see what EA would do with this remake. Flash forward to February 2022, and they released a gameplay trailer where it introduced a new feature that changed the game for the best. And keep in mind, this game is still considered one of the best remakes to have been done since the Resident Evil 2 remake. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit later on in the video. I just wanted to give you guys a quick summary of how we got to the remake before we get into that. I just want to quickly say, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and do that, because according to YouTube, 97% of the people who watch are not subscribed to the channel, and let's try to change that number by hitting the subscribe button. But now that we've gotten that all out of the way, let's talk about some Dead Space. So, to talk about the remake, we need to go way back after the launch of Dead Space 3. Dead Space 3 had a very bad launch because EA had tried to follow the trend of the combination of action and horror in a single-player game, and they also tried to add cooperative, and that's because gaming companies had cooperative fever at that point for some reason, and it dominated the market. Not only that, but the ending was poorly received, with all of the microtransactions being stuffed into it and the real ending being locked behind a paywall. There were plans for a 4th game, but because of the poor sales and all the backlash from the 3rd game, the game was eventually cut, and the team was disbanded and sent off to work on other games like Battlefield Hardline. Eventually, Visceral Games, the team behind Dead Space, was disbanded, and all plans for a sequel were lost into the void of space. Visceral would be closed in 2017, further losing any chance of seeing a new entry into the series. That was until 2021. In 2021, a reporter for GameSpot, Jeff Gruber, reported that EA was in the process of working on a remake with Motive Studios. And I like Jeff Gruber. He seems like a very honest guy, and he always really hits the mark with everything he says. Motive Studios, these were the guys that were behind Star Wars Squadron, and they helped DICE create Battlefront 2. Jeff Gruber speculated that the remake was started because of the success that Capcom had with the Resident Evil franchise, and it was instrumental in EA greenlighting the remake. The remake was being developed by EA's famous Frostbite engine, which Motive had previously used to create Star Wars Squadron, and the game would keep the same structure as the original story, but would redesign key assets, character models, and environments. The main focus that the devs wanted to have was to keep the game moving in one continuous shot. In other terms, they wanted to remove the loading screens that the game had when you would travel through the tram system. Content that was supposed to be added to the original game that was removed because of technical limitations were added into this game. So all of the new things that were added for this game was stuff from the original game. The game also did not feature microtransactions, which coming from EA is a big surprise. Another big component that the game had that really changed it was the flesh system. This would change the game entirely. This new system allowed for the horror elements to really shine in this game. This flesh system changed the way that you could kill necromorphs. The peeling system, for example, would basically work like this. When you would shoot the limb of a necromorph, it would start at burning the clothes, then the flesh, then the muscle, and then right to the bone before being completely severed, which is absolutely crazy when you go through and you play this. The next big change was huge from the original, which was the voicing of the protagonist. Gunnar Wright was the guy who voiced Isaac in both Dead Space 2 and 3, and he would actually return to voice Isaac in the remake. They did this in a way that would actually improve on the main game, unlike Frank West in Dead Rising 4, if you catch my drift. The game director for this remake would be helmed by the same man who would create Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Eric Baptizat. I think that's how you pronounce that. He left Ubisoft, and he was the guy who did Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I didn't really care for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but he did a good job on the Dead Space remake. All of the development and work that was done for the game would be featured in multiple live streams over the course of 2022, with a live stream that was done March 21st, 2022, showing footage from the game and introducing the new sound design. The new sound design would work like this. They would use proper occlusion systems to muffle or silence themselves at the developer's command behind the walls. Heart and breathing rates were based on studies of a 40-year-old man's stamina. Depending on whether the player was running, walking, injured, or in distress, the breathing and the heart rate would change. I thought this was absolutely crazy when I played this. I was blown away by this. And suffocation now would be changed as well, so that oxygen levels reach normal as opposed to the instantaneous change like in the original game. So what I mean by that is, say if you go into a part of the ship that has no oxygen, you would start to hear your character slowly suffocate, and when you would go back into a place where there is oxygen, it would take a little bit for your breathing to go back to normal. Just crazy stuff. Another crazy change they did was to the dialogue. So, say if you are about to enter a cutscene, and on your way to wherever you're going, you get attacked by a horde of necromorphs and you are damaged, stabbed, sliced, whatever. If you go into that cutscene, your character will sound depending on how his health bar is. So if he's in good health, he'll sound normal. If he's slightly injured, he'll sound a little out of breath. And if he's close to death, he will be stuttering and, not being able to speak correctly. The developers also showed the work in progress footage of the plasma cutter and the pulse rifle, as well as a 2-minute showcase of a work-in-progress reimagined version of the Maintenance Bay area from Chapter 1 of the original game. They would also say that the game would be announced for early 2023, and the developers hinted at another preview of the game in the near future, and this actually would be not that far away. The next live stream that they would do would be on May 12th of 2022. The developers did another live stream where they showed off more progress on the improved visual aspects of the game. These included improved textures, VFX, as well as highly detailed characters and NPC models with behind-the-scenes looks on one of Isaac's rig suits as well as one of the slasher models. Finally, a short preview of the reimagined engine room from Chapter 3 of the original game was shown, with massive leaps in visual quality compared to the original. And this is actually where the release date would be announced for January 27th, 2023, marking almost a decade since the last game in the franchise, which was Dead Space 3. And I will die on this hill when I say this, but to this day, I still find Isaac's character change to be very off-putting. They made him look like Squidward with plastic surgery. But besides that, that's really a lot of the development. They showed a lot of it off in live streams, so it's something that is pretty much public knowledge if you go and look at the videos that they have on their YouTube channel. When I saw all of these major changes that they were making to the game, I was completely blown away, personally. I know this is kind of a little sidestep from where I normally go next with the video. I just want to say that these guys did such a phenomenal job on this game. When we, like for example with the Silent Hill 2 remake, when they showed off gameplay of that, so many people criticized the character models, the combat, even like the sound design of the game, which prompted them to go back and fix the trailer for the Silent Hill 2 remake. But this game, like, they just did such an amazing job, and Motive Studios really deserve the credit that they get. And I really wish that they would get a chance to work on a Dead Space 2 remake, but that's something we're gonna have to talk about later in the video, because I have some bad news for you guys. But let's get into the plot of the game. So the game starts off with Isaac listening to a message from Nicole, and the group is heading to the Ishimura, which is on the outskirts of Aegis 7. The crew contains Isaac Clarke, Kendra, Johnson, Hammond, and Chen. And when they arrive there, because of an equipment malfunction, they end up having to crash land on the Ishimura, with Johnson becoming injured in the crash. The rest of the team go to investigate what's going on, and once they arrive at the main security checkpoint, the room goes into lockdown, and Chen is killed, while Isaac is then separated from the rest of the crew and has to run from the necromorphs into the elevator. Once he gets to the bottom of the elevator, he finds one of the most iconic weapons in the franchise, the plasma cutter. And once he collects this, he finally gets to the tram station, where the station is broken and Isaac needs to fix it. Once that is fixed, Kendra and Hammond will head to the bridge, and Isaac will return back to the Kellyan to get the Singularity Core. Just when you thought the situation couldn't get any worse, he heads back to the Kellyan to find out that the necromorphs are destroying the Singularity Core, ruining any chance for them to escape. The ship will then explode, killing Johnson. Later, Kendra and Hammond are separated while being chased by necromorphs, and Isaac will need to upgrade his security clearance to enter most of the locked doors on the Ishimura. This brings him down to medical, where he finds out that the captain of the ship was killed during the outbreak, and when he goes to retrieve the security codes from the captain's body, Captain Matthias will change into a necromorph literally right on top of Isaac while he's trying to get the key card. Later, Isaac finds out that all the engines are pretty much destroyed, and he'll need to go down and fix it to avoid having the ship crash land back onto the planet. Isaac will then go down to engineering, and he will fix the engines so that the ship doesn't crash. But this is when Kendra finds out that they were mining on Aegis 7 illegally, and they found an alien artifact called the Marker. This will also include the Church of Unitology, and Isaac hates the Church of Unitology because his mother was a Unitologist, and her being a devout believer, she killed his father and herself, and that pretty much made Isaac hate Unitology from there on. After this though, Isaac will find out that the ADS cannons are offline, and Hammond needs Isaac to go up to the captain's nest so they can figure out how to fix it and where to go next. So this is where Isaac will head up to Hammond. Once he arrives up there, Hammond is attacked by a mutated Chen while searching the ship's bridge. Unwilling to harm his friend, he seals Chen inside of a escape pod and jettisons him out into space. And then they try to come up with a plan on how to fix the ADS cannons so that the ship's hull doesn't get ripped apart by all of the debris from the Aegis 7 planet crack. So after this, Isaac will head down and he'll have to reroute the power back to the ADS cannons, and then he has to manually activate them himself so that they will destroy any of the meteorites that come crashing into the ship. Once this is done and he leaves, they receive a message from Medical, which appears to be Nicole, telling survivors that Medical is a sanctuary. So Isaac decides to head there next. Once he gets there, he finds out that this was a trap planned by Dr. Mercer, who was luring survivors there so that he could experiment on them. Once he is able to get to the message where Nicole was sending, or where the transmission was coming from, Dr. Mercer then freezes Isaac in stasis and then unleashes his regenerating necromorph monster. From here, he has all of medical lockdown, so Isaac needs to head to Mercer's office to lift the lockdown. Once he gets to Mercer's office and lifts the lockdown, he sees another man inside of Mercer's lab who tells him that the air has been poisoned and that hydroponics, there is a doctor there who knows how to fix it. He just needs to collect liquid nitrogen. This means that Isaac now has to go to the cryogenics department of medical to collect this. He does this while trying to battle the regenerating necromorph, but eventually he is able to capture the regenerating necromorph, freeze it, and then collect the liquid nitrogen to head to hydroponics. Isaac will then head to hydroponics and create the enzyme. While he's here, he meets Dr. Elizabeth Cross, who works there, and she's trying to find Jacob Temple, another ship engineer. And she's trying to kill a giant necromorph that she calls the Leviathan, that threatens to poison the entire Ishimura's oxygen supply. Isaac has to go around and inject this enzyme into multiple different wheezing necromorphs so that he can damage the Leviathan enough to be able to kill it off the ship, so the oxygen supply will stay stable long enough for them to find a way off the ship. So, after killing all these wheezing necromorphs, he then has to go in and fight the Leviathan. Eventually, he kills it and it gets sucked out into the vacuum of space. After this, he finds out that the men down in the mining part of the ship were working on an SOS beacon so that they could get help. But when they get down there, they find out that the tubes to launch this SOS beacon are shut down and they need access codes from one of the higher-ups in the mining crew. So Isaac will have to go get this, and he'll also have to go find the SOS beacon. He is able to find the SOS beacon with the help of Nicole, who unlocks the door that allows him to go in and get the beacon. Once he gets the beacon, he heads back to the main mining operations room so that he could launch it, or unclog the tubes so that he can launch the SOS beacon. But the miners booby-trapped the launching tubes and they explode. So now Isaac needs to find another way to launch this beacon. Well, luckily there's a giant rock inside of the operations room that he can attach the beacon to and launch this giant asteroid into space. So Isaac goes to work to do that. He disables the gravity tethers that are holding this giant boulder, and he climbs onto the boulder and puts the SOS beacon on there and heads back to the mining operation room so that he can launch it. This then will trigger a lockdown where, once again, we meet our buddy, the Regen, or the Hunter Necromorph, who you'll have to fight and try to escape from to get back to just to get out of mining. Once the SOS beacon is sent out, we find out that it's picked up by the USCM Valor, who then tries to contact us to tell us that they got our SOS beacon and they found our escape pod, which, if you remember, we sent out an escape pod that had a necromorph in it. And we try to contact them to tell them not to open the escape pod, but there's a problem with the long-range communication. So Isaac now has to head down to the communication part of the Ishimura and has to rewire the satellite. Once the satellite is rewired, we have to send out a message, but the antenna isn't working. So now Isaac must go back up and see why the long-range antenna won't work. And guess what? The Leviathan that we sent out earlier is now stuck to the long-range antenna. So Isaac must go out and defeat the Leviathan in time so that the USCM Valor does not open the escape pod. Unfortunately, after killing it, we activate the antenna, but it's too late. The USCM Valor opened the escape pod, and now there is an outbreak on that ship. This will cause the Valor to lose control and crash into the Ishimura. But not all hope is lost. Hammond then contacts us and tells us that he found a shuttle, an executive shuttle down in the crew deck. All it needs is a singularity core, which the Valor has one. So now Isaac and Hammond make their way to the Valor so that they can get this singularity core so they can bring it back to the executive shuttle and fix it. So Isaac goes out into space and heads towards the Valor. Once Isaac finally gets on board, both him and Hammond find out that the Valor was prepped for war. They had nuclear warheads on board to destroy the Ishimura if an outbreak had started. Isaac has to dispose of the warheads, and on his way out, he talks to Dr. Kyne, who tries to convince him to bring the marker back to the planet. Isaac will eventually get to the Singularity Core chamber, and this is where Hammond gets trapped inside with a necromorph version of Chen. Hammond will then sacrifice himself to kill this monstrous Chen. Isaac will retrieve the core and then escape the Valor before its destruction. When he returns to the Ishimura, Kendra tells him that the crew deck has been opened and now they can go to the escape shuttle. The escape shuttle, however, is being blocked by tentacles, and Isaac runs into Dr. Mercer again, who kills Jacob Temple right in front of him. Isaac now has to destroy the tentacles and avoid the regenerating necromorph at the same time. He is able to do this once he gets to the last tentacle. Kyne convinces him to bring the marker back to the planet using the shuttle. So he destroys the tentacle and brings the marker down to the shuttle. Now Isaac must install the Singularity Core, and he uses the fire from the ship to burn up the regenerating necromorph. Then the ship will be ready for takeoff. Right as he's about to load the marker, the giant tentacle monster comes back and grabs Isaac and also grabs the marker, crushing Dr. Mercer, who walked up to the marker before having it get grabbed, and they are both pulled away. Isaac will then go and retrieve the marker, and then he'll load the marker onto the shuttle. But Kendra murders Dr. Kyne and escapes on her own. She reveals her true identity as a covert agent sent to retrieve the marker, which she explains is a failed attempt at reverse engineering alien technology. The marker was buried on Aegis 7 when it proved too dangerous to control, but the Ishimura, engaged in illegal mining, revealed its presence, resulting in the Valor being sent to scrub the discovery. But before she can flee, Isaac and Nicole recall the shuttle and then use it to fly to the surface of Aegis 7, even though Kendra escapes through the escape pod. Isaac and Nicole will successfully return the marker to the planet, but Kendra arrives and steals it back. This is where the big twist happens. Kendra reveals that Nicole has been dead all along and that she committed suicide to avoid becoming a necromorph. The Nicole that Isaac was working for was actually Dr. Cross, who hallucinated Isaac as Jacob Temple, and the marker manipulated them both into returning the marker to the hive mind, which is a giant necromorph that telepathically controls the creatures. Cross refuses to help Kendra take the marker off of Aegis 7 and is shot and killed. Kendra then tries to escape aboard the shuttle, but gets absolutely annihilated by the hive mind. Isaac now has to fight the hive mind alone, and he eventually kills it. He abandons the marker and escapes Aegis 7 as the Ishimura's gravity stabilizer power fails and its payload crashes onto the planet's surface. Alone, Isaac tries to rest before being attacked by a hostile hallucination of Nicole. And you might have thought that that's where the game ends. Well, I mean, technically, yeah, that is where the game ends, but there is a secret ending that you can get if you collect all of the hidden markers throughout the game. And if you place them in one of the captain's quarters rooms near the end of the game, the cutscene will change at the end. It'll show Isaac covered in marker symbols, and it hints at the next game. where Isaac is going to be building something special, which is obviously hinting at Dead Space 2, where his mind is used to build the marker. And that's where the story concludes. Unfortunately, we might not be able to even see any of those endings pay off, and I'll explain that later. So there's actually a lot of things that they changed from the original, and somehow they managed to change things but also keep the game exactly the same. It is, I would say, the perfect remake by 2023 standards. A lot of it has to do with the map design. In the story, when you have to go to the engine room, you normally would take the tram down to engineering, but in the remake, you have to take a different path down to engineering through zero gravity, and I thought that was extremely cool, but it deviates from the main line of progression without completely ruining it. Another cool thing that they added was, instead of power nodes being used to open doors, they gave you security clearance cards that you could upgrade throughout the game to get hidden loot and schematics to upgrade your guns. Also, the upgrading system changed from having to use nodes to fill empty spaces with your weapon upgrades. Each node that you get for each upgrade, it actually serves a purpose towards progressing into a full-fledged badass. The tram system is no longer the only transport method too. Isaac can go all over the ship through all kinds of different paths throughout the ship. The Ishimura, unlike in the original, can be backtracked almost at any time in the game, besides for the final Aegis 7 planetside section. There are also new side missions that can give you more story as to some of the things that weren't really fleshed out in the original game. There's a side mission where you can discover how Dr. Mercer created the Hunter Necromorph, and I thought that was amazing. I thought that was so cool that they were able to go back and add things like that. Isaac also has a new light source in between his stasis and health bar. It's an upside down pentagon that brightens when Isaac looks at an object that he can use kinesis on. So there's just a bunch of cool things that they changed for this game that really made it so much better. I also like the way they changed the dynamic between Hammond and Chen, because it gives you more detail about their history and shows more emotion when Hammond loses one of his own crew members. I still think the sound Hammond makes when he sacrifices himself is absolutely funny. They also changed the narrative around Nicole at the end of the game. Instead of Isaac just talking to a ghost, it is shown that he's talking to Cross, and I thought that was really cool. I am a veteran when it comes to the Dead Space franchise. I have played all of the games right down to the mobile games, and I mean, let's not talk about the mobile games right now, but that's besides the point. Let's move on to the release and the sales numbers, and then we're going to talk about why we might not see another Dead Space remake in the future. So, the Dead Space remake would release January 27th, 2023, and it was received very well. A lot of people would praise its graphical improvements right down to its quality of life with the upgrades and the side missions. People also loved the hidden ending. This game got so many people hyped up for what would come next. The Dead Space remake would go on to sell millions of copies and would gross an estimated number of $74 billion, $231,446.31, which, holy cow, with numbers like that, how could EA not immediately greenlight a sequel? Yeah, about that. So, in April 2024, it was reported by Jeff Grubb, yep, the same guy who leaked the initial remake rumors, stated that EA has shelved Dead Space 2 Remake because of lackluster sales, and that we'll probably never see another remake of the series in our lifetime. EA would then counter these rumors by stating that they were false, and they said yes, they had some ideas for the Dead Space 2 remake, but they didn't pan out, and Motive Studios has been split up to work on other projects, like their Iron Man game, and help work on the next Battlefield game. which to me sounds exactly like history repeating itself, like what EA did to Visceral Games, and this set the community in an uproar, because with the sales numbers of Dead Space Remake being so good, what on earth would make them think a sequel would not immediately be praised by fans, and why would they think that this would not be such a huge seller? Well, for starters, it's EA, and this company basically has the finance senses of a bat. For them, if they can't jam microtransactions up the ass of the players like the players are a sock puppet, then it's not profitable, which I think is a bad move. There have been calls for EA to just sell the license to somebody who will make a game for the fans, but that probably won't go anywhere. To make matters worse and to jam the proverbial knife into the wound of the players, Battlefield 2042 just had an event where you could get Dead Space skins and weapons just in case the situation couldn't hurt anymore. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments, because I'm pretty upset about that, but what are we gonna do, you know? Next, we're gonna talk about why you should play this in 2024, and then we'll end with my final thoughts. So, I know this shouldn't even be a question as to should you play this in 2024. Yes, a-fucking-lutely, you should play this in 2024. I can't scream that any louder than if I climbed the highest building in America and screamed at the top of my lungs. This game is an absolute masterpiece, and just the overall gameplay design and graphics, it's just perfect.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
All jokes aside, it's the perfect game to play if you are new to the franchise. And Dead Space 2 being next in the franchise, even that game holds up really well. You could move on to the next game in the franchise without missing a beat. This is the best part of the remake of the modern era by far. They didn't cut corners or content, they actually added more than what was expected. So many people believe this game wasn't going to hold a glass to the original, and I was one of those people who thought that originally too, and I was extremely wrong. I was also one of those idiots who thought Callisto Protocol was going to be better than the Dead Space remake, and in hindsight, God, I was so wrong. But if you're new to this franchise, I highly recommend checking this game out. So, my final thoughts with this game is, we're stuck with EA holding Dead Space over our heads, and they blatantly mock us with it, whether it's with surveys or adding crappy skins to an already shit game. I wish that they would just ignore Battlefield, because the franchise is already pretty much ruined. Call of Duty is one, just greenlight a sequel to the damn game. They've left it behind in the dirt so many times, and you have to really ask yourself, what was the point of them making this remake? Was it to ride the success of the remakes, or do they actually intend on remaking all of the games and maybe even finishing off the franchise with Dead Space 4? It really makes you wonder at this point. EA has used Dead Space like a damn fleshlight, and there's no washing the cum stains out of Dead Space. Not this time. There's still hope though. Once Motive Studios is done with their side projects, hopefully they'll come back to the franchise, but how long until it becomes 10 years like the last Dead Space game? I'm one of those people who absolutely love these games, and I love watching videos on all of the lore of these games, and actually, let me just give you guys a great recommendation. If you guys want to watch videos on all of the background to the lore for this game, I recommend checking out The British Runner, because this guy does great work on really digging deep into the franchise, and his videos were part of the reason why I made my channel in the first place. He is just an overall great guy based on the few chats I've had with him in his comments section. So go check him out if you want to get caught up on the story and the lore behind the franchise. But that's all I really have to say. I just want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this, go watch my most recent Dead Rising video because it's a good one. Or go watch my other videos so that they could be recommended to other people who like this kind of content. Also, don't forget to subscribe and comment what your thoughts are down below. Thank you again for watching, and have a good night.